Hello there, my name is Hido and welcome to the Pantheon, where in Innistrad there's a wedding going on, and it's lovely, isn't it, when two horrible, sort of near-immortal beings get together. And one of them is Edgar, the Charmed Groom. 4 mana for a 4/4. Vampire Noble. Other vampires you control get +1/+1. He's one of the lads, he just gets around, goes, hey everyone, you're a bit bigger now. And when he dies, return to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. So what does it transform into? Hey! A coffin. So Edgar Markov's Coffin is a legendary artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 black and white vampire creature token with lifelink. Put a bloodline counter on Edgar Markov's Coffin. Then, if there are 3 or more bloodline counters on it, remove those counters and transform it back into Edgar, so he keeps coming backwards and forwards. Nice little bit of storytelling going on there. You know, he comes back, he's ready for more. So it's quite a cool commander. You're not going to have to recast him that often because he's going to become the Coffin and then come back as his vampire self. So I really like this card. I think it's quite interesting. It's a good use of the sort of flip mechanic. And that's what we want to see, isn't it? Do you know what else I'd like to see? You subscribing to this channel. Please subscribe. I'm going to be making videos like this for every single legendary creature. And so come and join me, you know. Lots of nice information for everyone. And without further ado, let's have a look at my top 5 for Edgar. In at number 5, what have we got? Well, we've got vampires. Ooh, who would have guessed? Or more specifically, token vampires and ways of making tokens. So this is important because with a buff like this, giving +1/+1 to all vampires, we want to get as many on the field as possible. And Maverin Fane is a great way of doing it. It's Dusk Apostle, 3 mana 2/2 vampire. Whenever 1 or more non-token vampires you control attack, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So we're going to be getting tons of vampires that are going to be coming in, and they get +1/+1 from our commander. That's really nice, isn't it? So a really good way of building up a board state, and you know, our commander makes vampire tokens when it's flipped into its coffin. It just does everything the deck wants to do. Then we've got a Legion's Landing, a 1 white for a legendary enchantment. It enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Whenever you attack 3 or more creatures, transform Legion's Landing. Now, the transformation is actually pretty simple if we're playing a lot of token generators, because we can just swing in with tokens. Doesn't care whether it's a token or a non-token. And then, mono white ramp here, it turns into a Danto the First Fort, a legendary land that taps for a white. Pay 3 and tap it, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So excellent to have this effect on a land. Chump blocker whenever you need it, or just builds up your army. It's a vampire entering. Really, really great card, and it's nice and cheap at 1 white mana. Then there's a Lender, the Dusk Rose, 4 mana for a 1/1 lifelinker. Whenever another creature dies, put a 1/1 counter on a Lender. That's also non-token, so this plays very well into the token theme. And then, when she dies, create X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is a Lender's power. So, baseline, this will be a 2/2 if our commander's on the field, because, you know, our commander will give this +1/+1. But then with all the tokens we're generating, and then we can sacrifice them in an aristocrat sort of style, we can end up making this massive. She dies, we get another massive army that's also buffed by our commander. It does everything we want. Then there's Sorin, Lord of Innistrad. 4 mana for a 3/3. Sorin is Sorin Markov, you know, I think it's Edgar's son? I can't actually remember. But Sorin +1, put a 1/1 black and vampire creature token with lifelink onto the battlefield. Or lifelink. Then -2, you get an emblem with creatures you control get +1/+0. You don't want to be giving creatures minus, do you? But this is a great thing. Emblems can't be interacted with, so all of your tokens will forever be larger. Then -6, destroy up to 3 target creatures and other planeswalkers. Return each card onto the battle from a graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. So everything you destroy with that ability, you get back. So you can build up your army, getting the 1/1s, maybe use them as chunk blockers. And then that -3 is just going to be ridiculous. Get all sorts of lovely goodies. Then we've got a Bloodline Keeper, another flip card here. The flip cards, you know, it's on theme for Edgar, isn't it? 4 mana 3/3 flyer, vampire. Tap, put a 2/2 black vampire creature token flying onto the battlefield. And then pay a black, transform Bloodline Keeper. Activate this ability only if you control 5 or more vampires. And then we slip into Lord of Lineage. Vampire flying 5/5. Other vampire creatures you control gets +2/+2. So an excellent buff there. All of our little tokens are going to be colossal. And then tap, put a 2/2 black vampire creature token onto the battlefield. And it's got flying, so a nice bit of evasion. Great way of making tokens, and then it buffs up our team for just a single black. This card is phenomenal in this style of deck. And that brings me on to number 4. And at number 4, we've got Kaya Geist Hunter. Now, she's not a vampire, but we are making a lot of tokens. That second ability is phenomenal with tokens. 3 mana, 3 loyalty, +1. Creatures you control gain death touch till end of turn. That is also absolutely incredible with all our small tokens, because we can just swing in. If anyone blocks, well, they're going to lose their creature. Put a 1/1 counter on up to 1 target creature token you control, so our little tokens are going to be growing. -2 until end of turn. If one or more tokens will be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. So if we have a mass token generator, well, it's now a mass token generator, if you get where I'm coming from. So this does everything we want to do. -6, exile our cards from our graveyards and create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying for each card exiled this way. Bit of graveyard hate, you know, it's not reliable because it's an ultimate, so it has to sit on the board for a while, but it's nice and it can generate a massive army. So really quite good. Then there's Anointed Procession, speaking of the token theme. 4 mana, enchantment. If an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead. So absolutely doubling everything you want to do, which is just phenomenal. Our Commander's Coffin now makes 2 1/1s. Somebody stop me. But if we've got so many tokens, let's have an intangible virtue, or at least strive to have some. 2 mana for an enchantment. Creature tokens you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance. So that's really nice. It doubles the power of all of our 1/1s, and, you know, just makes any flyers into vigilance flyers, so they're good on defense, on offense, which is nice if we're playing a lot of planeswalkers, which, you know, might be something you want to go into, because there's a little proliferate sub-theme coming up. Then this takes us away from the sort of vampire synergies, but it's just so good with tokens, I had to include it. Divine Visitation, 5 mana for an enchantment. If 1 or more creature tokens will be created under your control, that many 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance are created instead. So if we were to make, you know, 6 1/1s, well, we've now got 6 4/4 vigilance flyers. Yes, they're not vampires, so they won't get the buffs, but by God, they are amazing. They are really, really good. So a great card to include in this style of deck. Which brings me on to number 3. At number 3, we've got Proliferate. Ooh, a little spoiler from before. Yawgmoth Thran Physician, amazing card. 4 mana, 2/4, protection from humans. I don't like humans myself. Pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature, so one of our tokens. Put a -1/-1 counter onto 1 target creature and draw a card. Ooh, that's turning all of our tokens into cards. And we can also wipe the board. Then double black, discard a card, Proliferate. So Proliferate, you put an additional counter on anything that already has a counter, including players. So why do we want to proliferate? Well, we could go down the direction of, you know, putting +1/+1 counters on our creatures, and then we could grow them with Proliferate. But the tomb side, Tombstone Stairwell, no, the crypt side of our commander, it cares about having count on it, and you need to get up to 3 counters to be able to flip it back. So if we can proliferate that, we can speed it up, and then we can flip it earlier, which is really quite nice. And if we're going into sort of different directions with planeswalk and stuff, the proliferate works well with that. So Grateful Apparition, 2 mana spirit with flying. When it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, proliferate. So a 1/1 flyer, yes, not doing that much damage, but if you can proliferate things back, bring back our commander a turn early, we can get back to the good stuff. Then the Khan's Bastion, a land that taps for a colour, and pay 4 and tap to proliferate. So double all the counters, not double, put an extra one on. And then the Sword of Truth and Justice, 3 mana for an equip 2. Quick creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from white and blue. 2 nice colours to have protection from. This is great for protecting our commander, but we can also get in for damage. And if we do, if the quick creature deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control, and then proliferate. So we can bring back our commander early, get our planeswalkers up to the sort of ultimate range, This has a lot of play, and it's just a great card to include in the deck. Then, similarly, if we've got the crypt side of our commander on the field, if we flicker it, it will actually come back as Edgar. So we want things that can flicker artifacts, and Flicker Wisp, and other things as well. White is a great flicker colour, so we're going to have a lot of creatures that enter the battlefield, have an effect, things like that. Flicker Wisp, 3 mana, 3/1. Flying, when it enters the battlefield, exile another target permanent. So it could be a planeswalker, it could be a creature, and then, or an artifact. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So our commander will come back as Edgar. He will be reborn out of his crypt. Then Cosmic Intervention is a really cool card. 4 mana for an instant. If an opponent you control will be put into a graveyard from the battlefield this turn, exile it instead. Return to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Having things like this in the deck will really protect you against certain people's strategies. Some people just want to blow everything up. Board wipes very prevalent in Commander, and having something like this is phenomenal and works well with our Commander being flipped. If we can somehow sacrifice the artifact or destroy it ourselves, we can bring it back to the field untapped, untransformed. Foretell for 2 mana, so we can put this into exile and then foretell it at a later time for the cheap cost. It's really nice. And then Felidar Guardian, a classic in a vampire deck. It's a cat. I don't know if those work together, but 4 mana for a 1/4. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile another target permanent you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So our artifact commander goes whoop, and he's back alive. He's just erupted out of his tomb. And that brings me on to number 2. And at number 2, we've got buffs. Now, this one is interesting. It is a vampire, so I wanted to include it. But it can be really crippling to our own strategy. So a lot of the tokens that I talked about are white, so they're non-black. But this card, Ascendant Evinkar, I don't know. 6 mana for a 3/3 with flying. It's a vampire. Other black creatures you control get +1/+1. So if you were going to include this, I'd really lean into making as many of our tokens and things like that black if possible. Because non-black creatures get -1/-1. So all of the 1/1 white vampire tokens that we were talking about earlier, it will kill it, but it also affects your opponents. It's like an Elish Norn, so including an Elish Norn in this deck would be phenomenal. It pumps up all of our creatures and takes our opponents down. But this is just such a cool card. I love the white version of this card. He's wonderful. He's a really cool commander. So I just thought I'd include the black version. Then other vampire sort of buffs that we've got: a Legion Lieutenant, a white and a black for a Vampire Knight. Other vampires you control get +1/+1. Simple, effective. All of our tokens are going to be buffed by this. Exactly what you want. Then we've got a Thirsting Bloodlord. 4 mana for a 3/3. Other vampires you control get +1/+1. Simple, effective. You know exactly what you're doing with it. You just play it and suddenly you're attacking for more damage. Then there's the Cordial Vampire. 2 black. This is slightly different. 1/1. When it or another creature dies, put a 1/1 count on each vampire you control. So this plays into the Proliferate sort of theme I was talking about earlier. We can just sacrifice one of our little tokens. Bing, bang, bosh. All of our board state now has a 1/1 counter. It's wonderful. It works incredibly well in the deck. And that takes me on to number 1. And at number 1, we've got an aristocrat style of deck. Because I was just talking about that card, you want to sacrifice things to get those triggers. Well, if we're sacrificing things, let's have vampires that use that for the greater good, or at least our greater good. 2 mana, 0/1 vampire. Whenever it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This is amazing with all of the tokens that we've got knocking around. And because it's also your opponent's creatures, if there's a board wipe, 20 creatures die, where you can ping someone for 20, we gain 20 back. There's a little lifelink sub-theme in this deck. It's great. It just works so well. Similarly, we've got Callistria Highborn, 2 mana for a 2/2. Whenever it or another vampire you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay a black. If you do, target player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So yes, you have to hold up that black mana, but it's so good, so powerful. Those pings will really stack up and end up killing our opponent. Then there's the Cruel Celebrant, 2 mana, 1/2 vampire. When it or another creature or planeswalker you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and gain 1 life. So on the surface, because it's only our creatures, this does look a bit weaker, but it's just as good. You know, you're going to have great effects with it. And every one of your creatures that dies, you're actually pinging for 3 because you can have 3 opponents. So this card will do so much work. Then we've got Falconwrath Noble, 4 mana 2/2 flyer. When it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. It's exactly the same as the first one. Can't remember its name now. Oh, God. What do I... My mind, it's melted. But this is an amazing card, and it's a flying attacker, so it can pressure planeswalkers. Then, if we're talking about sacrificing things, Butcher of Malakir, well, it's amazing. 7 mana for a 5/4 vampire. Flying, whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So we're just going to manipulate the board, sacrifice a token, they have to sacrifice their actual good creatures. Not that a 1/1 token's bad, but it is inherently worth less. Then, a great sacrifice outlet that plays into the +1/+1 counter theme is Bloodflow Connoisseur. 3 mana for a 1/1 sacrifice creature, put a 1/1 counter on Bloodflow Connoisseur. So we can just sacrifice one of our tokens, get a counter on this, trigger our things that care about things dying. Amazing card and works well in the deck. And finally, a vampire that we want to be sacrificing, Bloodghast. 2 mana 2/1. It can't block. It has haste as long as the opponent has 10 or less life. And it's got landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may return Bloodghast from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can sacrifice this, play your land, it comes straight back. You can sacrifice it again, get tons of triggers. Amazing card that you'll be thankful to put into the deck. And those are my top 5 for Edgar. Mr. Markov, I believe. Really, really cool commander. I like the flipping and, you know, playing those sort of flicker cards that work well with it. It's nice, and, you know, having a bit of proliferate tech, it all comes together quite well. I really like the sort of deck building restrictions that you got to put on this. So, if you've enjoyed this video, please do like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.